Have you ever met someone who seems to attract chaos wherever they go? The coworker who's always caught in some new argument, the friend who somehow ends up surrounded by drama no matter how many times they swear they've done with toxic people, or maybe it's you who feels that way. You change cities, jobs, even social circles, but the story repeats itself, same characters, different names. If you've ever wondered why some people walk through life like they've got an invisible shield while others seem to carry a magnet for emotional predators, I want you to listen closely. Because what I'm about to share isn't just pop psychology or feel-good motivation. It's a real mechanism that determines whether you stay stuck in emotional chaos or finally step out of it for good. We live in a culture that normalizes exhaustion. We call it being nice, being understanding, or keeping the peace. But underneath that politeness, many people are running on empty, emotionally drained, always giving more than they receive. You know the feeling, the endless conversations where you play therapist, the guilt when you say no, the tight smile that hides the frustration. You promise yourself that next time you'll be tougher, but when that next time comes, somehow you're right back in the same storm, wondering, why me? What am I doing wrong? The truth is, you are not cursed. You're not broken. You've just been living unaware of the silent signal you send into the world. Imagine for a second that each of us walks around with an invisible frequency, like a Wi-Fi network that transmits who we are emotionally. It carries our confidence, our fears, our wounds, and our desires. And just like certain devices connect automatically to open networks, toxic people, manipulators, narcissists, energy vampires, can sense which networks are unprotected. They don't do this consciously, but their intuition locks onto your unhealed pain the way sharks sense blood in water. They're drawn not to your kindness or generosity but to the energy that leaks from the parts of you still searching for validation, love, or safety. Now, before you think this is about blaming yourself, let's be clear. Having open wounds doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The problem is that no one ever teaches us how to close those wounds properly. We cover them with perfectionism, people-pleasing, or fake positivity, thinking that if we're good enough, no one will hurt us again. But the very act of hiding pain sends the message that it still controls you. And toxic people, they can feel that message instantly. Here's the paradox: the more you try to prove you're kind, good, or harmless, the more you become a target. Why? Because the people who live off manipulation thrive on guilt and self-doubt. They test boundaries and watch how fast you bend. They see the way your tone changes when someone's upset with you, or how you rush to explain yourself when blamed. Every apology that comes from fear instead of accountability tells them exactly how to access your energy. And little by little, they build a web that looks like love, friendship, or loyalty, but in truth, it's control. You've probably noticed that the same type of person keeps showing up in your life. Maybe it's a demanding partner, a boss who undermines you, a friend who drains your time with endless drama. It's easy to say, I just have bad luck, but luck has nothing to do with it. What's really happening is resonance. The universe, or rather, your subconscious, keeps bringing you mirrors that reflect what's unhealed inside. Until you change the signal, the pattern will repeat. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, called this shadow work. He said that what we don't make conscious will rule our lives, and we'll call it fate. And that's exactly what happens when we stay unaware of the energy we project. But here's the part that should give you hope. The moment you start seeing the pattern, you've already taken back power. Because awareness breaks the spell. You can't unsee the truth once you recognize it. And the truth is that the drama doesn't choose you, you unknowingly invited by carrying unresolved pain that still asks to be witnessed. Once you begin to face that pain instead of covering it with busyness or false smiles, everything starts to shift. You become less reactive, more grounded, less appealing to those who thrive on chaos. I know that sounds abstract, so let's make it real. Think about the last time someone tried to guilt trip you, maybe a family member saying, "After all I've done for you," or a coworker acting offended because you didn't drop everything to help them. What happened inside you in that moment? Did you freeze? Did you feel that tug of guilt and start over-explaining? That feeling, that's the magnet. That's the energy they hook into. But when you learn to notice it without reacting, when you pause, breathe, and let the guilt pass without giving in, the hook can't hold. The magnet weakens. People often think that protecting themselves from toxicity means building walls, cutting everyone off, avoiding relationships, staying guarded. But that's not the real solution. Because if you build walls without healing what's inside, the wound just follows you behind those walls. You'll still attract the same situations, only with new faces. The real freedom comes not from fighting against toxic people but from becoming the kind of person they can't feed on. And that doesn't mean becoming hard or cynical. It means becoming whole. When you're whole, you stop trying to prove your worth. You stop needing constant validation. You stop apologizing for existing. And that inner shift is like turning off the signal that predators are drawn to. They walk right past you because there's nothing for them to take. You've closed the emotional Wi-Fi. You've gone password protected. So if you're tired of being the emotional caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who always gives while others take, start here, by asking yourself what part of me still believes I need to earn love, prove worth, or keep everyone happy. That's where the healing begins. Because once you see the invisible magnet, you can finally remove it. And that's the first step, the realization that it's not about avoiding toxic people, it's about transforming the energy within you that keeps calling them in. Once you do that, you stop walking through life as prey and start walking as someone who owns their presence, calm, grounded, untouchable. This is where your real strength begins. If you've ever wondered why toxic people seem to find you no matter where you go, it's not just bad luck. There's something deeper at play, something almost primal. Have you ever noticed how certain people can walk into a room and instantly sense who's confident and who's insecure? Who they can push and who they can't? That's not magic or manipulation, it's instinct. Emotional predators have a kind of radar, a sixth sense tuned to detect the slightest trace of unhealed pain. And whether we realize it or not, most of us are broadcasting those signals all the time. Think of it this way, human beings don't just communicate with words. We emit energy, subtle but real. You can feel it when you meet someone who's calm and self-assured, they radiate stability. And you can feel it when someone's anxious or desperate for approval, their energy vibrates with uncertainty. Toxic people, especially those who thrive on control and emotional feeding, have mastered the art of reading that energy. They don't even need you to speak, they can sense where the cracks are. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, saw this pattern long before social media or self-help books made it trendy. He understood that the wounds we carry from childhood, from rejection, from shame, from being unseen, don't disappear just because we grow up. They go underground. They become part of what he called the shadow, the hidden side of the personality that we don't want to acknowledge. And here's the thing, the shadow doesn't stay silent. It leaks out through our behavior, our tone, our reactions, and even our energy. That's what emotional predators pick up on. They don't go after everyone. They go after the ones who leak energy, the ones who subconsciously say, I need to be liked, I'm afraid of being rejected, I don't want to make anyone angry. They sense that vulnerability instantly, the same way a lion senses which gazelle is limping. It's not cruelty, it's instinct. But once you understand that dynamic, you stop being prey. You might be thinking, but why me? I'm kind, I'm giving, I try to help people. And that's exactly the point. Kindness without boundaries is the perfect hunting ground for manipulative people. They see empathy as access, generosity as permission. When you haven't learned to protect your emotional energy, you unconsciously radiate a signal that says, you can come in. You can be the strongest, smartest person in the room, but if part of you is still seeking validation or afraid of being seen as unkind, toxic people will find that door and walk right through it. Let's get practical. Have you ever had a boss or partner who seemed charming at first but gradually made you doubt yourself? They start small, a joke that stings, a criticism disguised as advice, a silent treatment that makes you chase their approval. That's not random. They're testing your energy. They're watching your reaction. If you defend yourself too much or apologize when you've done nothing wrong, they know exactly where your self-worth cracks. And once they've mapped that weakness, they'll return to it again and again. Not because they're necessarily evil, but because, deep down, they also feed off emotional chaos. It gives them a sense of control. And here's where Jung's insight becomes powerful. He said that the world will present you with the exact people and situations you need to see your unconscious patterns. Every toxic person you've met isn't just a curse, they're a mirror. They reflect back the part of you that still hasn't healed. The people who manipulate your guilt show you where you still confuse love with obligation. The ones who belittle you reveal where you've abandoned your own confidence. And the ones who constantly criticize you are pointing to the voice inside your head that's been doing the same thing for years. Once you start seeing life through that lens, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me about myself?" That's where real transformation begins. Because awareness is the first weapon that breaks the cycle. When you understand how your energy works, when you realize what you've been broadcasting unconsciously, you can finally take control of the signal. Now, don't confuse this with blame. This isn't about saying you're responsible for the actions of toxic people. Not at all. It's about taking responsibility for your frequency, what you emit, how you respond, and what you allow. You can't change who others are, but you can absolutely change what they find when they come near you. When your energy is grounded, self-contained, and calm, manipulators lose interest. You're not feeding the game. You become boring to them. Imagine you're walking through the world carrying a backpack full of unresolved emotions, fear, guilt, shame, resentment. Every time someone pokes at one of those emotions, your reaction gives away what's inside. They know exactly which buttons to push. But once you unpack that backpack, when you've looked at your wounds and learned from them, there's nothing left for them to press. They can push, but nothing happens. That's what psychological freedom feels like. And the fascinating part? When you start closing those energetic leaks, your external world rearranges itself. People who used to trigger you disappear. The same conversations that used to drain you suddenly feel irrelevant. You attract calmer, more authentic relationships, not because you're lucky but because your frequency changed. You are no longer playing the role of the fixer, the rescuer, the one who absorbs everyone's pain. You're simply you, solid, balanced, untouchable. So the next time you feel that familiar exhaustion after dealing with a toxic person, pause and ask yourself, what part of me felt threatened or unseen in that interaction? What fear did they touch that still lives inside me? That question alone starts to shift everything. Because once you see how emotional predators operate and how they sense what's unresolved, you can stop being the open network. You start broadcasting a new signal, one that says, "My energy is mine." And that, my friend, is the first real step toward becoming invisible to those who feed on chaos. Let's go deeper into something that might make you uncomfortable, but it's the heart of your healing. Every toxic person you've met, every manipulative relationship you've had, carries a message about something inside you that you haven't yet faced. And I know, that sounds harsh. When someone hurts you, the last thing you want to hear is that they might be showing you something about yourself. But Carl Jung called this the law of projection, and it changes everything once you understand it. Projection means this: the things we dislike or even hate in others are often reflections of traits we deny or repress within ourselves. It's not that you're the same as those people, it's that they activate a part of you that's been hidden, rejected, or silenced. The loud, arrogant coworker you can't stand might reflect your own buried desire to speak up without fear. The selfish family member who takes what they want might mirror your own unmet need to put yourself first for once. The manipulative ex who always twisted your words might show you where you've been too afraid to own your power. That's why those people get under your skin. They touch a nerve. They mirror something unresolved. Think about it. Why do certain behaviors drive you crazy while others barely register? Why does your friend shrug off the same thing that keeps you up at night? It's because what triggers us is personal. It's our shadow being poked. The things you repress most fiercely, anger, pride, control, jealousy, don't disappear. They just find new ways to appear in your life, often through other people. Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we will call it fate. Every projection is the universe's way of saying, look here. This is yours to heal. Let's get real with an example. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone takes credit for your work. You feel your blood boil. You tell yourself it's because they're arrogant or dishonest, and maybe they are. But beneath that reaction, there's something else. Maybe a part of you wishes you had the confidence to claim your ideas more boldly. Maybe you've been playing small, waiting for validation instead of owning your brilliance. That anger isn't just about them, it's a message from your deeper self saying, I want to be seen too. When you start looking at triggers this way, life stops feeling random and starts feeling like feedback. Instead of saying, that person makes me so angry, you begin to ask, what part of me is being reflected here? That's not weakness, that's radical self-awareness. Because once you own the projection, it loses power over you. You stop chasing people to change. You start changing the only thing you can control, your own awareness. But here's the catch, projection works both ways. You don't just project what you hate, you also project what you secretly admire. That's why sometimes we become obsessed with people we find fascinating or magnetic. You might look up to someone confident, creative, or unapologetic and think, I could never be like that. But the reason they fascinate you is because that same quality already lives in you. It's just waiting for permission to come out. What you envy in others points to your own dormant potential. Jung called this the gold in the shadow. The parts of you you've disowned aren't all dark, they're also brilliant, powerful, alive. So how do you start recognizing your projections in everyday life? Pay attention to your strongest emotional reactions. The moments you feel angry, jealous, or disgusted, those are signposts. Write them down. Ask yourself, what exactly bothers me about this person? Then look beneath the behavior. If someone's selfishness triggers you, maybe your lesson is learning to prioritize yourself. If someone's arrogance infuriates you, maybe your lesson is to stop apologizing for existing. If someone's coldness hurts you, maybe your shadow is the part that fears being alone. Every irritation hides a revelation. Here's a truth most people never hear: awareness doesn't immediately make the pain go away. When you start seeing your projections, it can sting. You might feel shame, defensiveness, or disbelief. But that's part of the process. Because awareness burns through illusion, and illusions are comfortable. But freedom isn't built on comfort, it's built on truth. The moment you admit, yes, I see this pattern in me, something powerful happens. You reclaim energy that's been scattered across your relationships. You stop leaking power through blame. You bring it all back home. And you'll notice something else: when you own your projections, toxic people lose leverage. They can't provoke the same reaction because you're no longer denying what they represent. The person who used to trigger you becomes almost invisible. It's not that they've changed, it's that you're no longer feeding the projection. You've taken back the energy they used to thrive on. The irony is that the more you own your shadow, the more compassionate you become. You stop dividing the world into good people and bad people. You understand that everyone is acting from their level of awareness, their own pain, their own unhealed wounds. That doesn't mean you tolerate abuse, it means you no longer carry hatred in your heart. And that inner peace, that emotional neutrality, is what truly sets you free. So here's your challenge: the next time someone irritates you or pulls you into drama, stop and breathe. Instead of reacting, observe. Ask yourself, what part of me is being mirrored right now? Don't judge it, just notice. Because every projection is an invitation. It's your unconscious trying to bring light to what's still in the dark. And once you accept that invitation, something extraordinary happens. You stop being haunted by the same characters, the same patterns, the same pain. You realize that every trigger was actually a teacher in disguise. And when you finally understand the lesson, the teacher disappears. That's the quiet power of self-awareness. That's how you begin to break free from the cycle once and for all. By now, you're starting to see how the same emotional patterns keep repeating until you face them. But let's talk about what actually keeps those patterns alive, the drama itself. Because awareness alone isn't enough. You can know exactly what's happening, you can see the manipulation, you can even understand your projections, and yet, you still find yourself getting pulled back into the same exhausting fights. Why? Because part of you is still feeding the game. Drama needs energy to survive. And the truth is, toxic people don't create that energy alone, they draw it out of you. Here's how it works. A manipulator never walks in and says, "Hey, I'd like to drain your emotional life force today." No, they do it through subtle invitations. A sarcastic comment, a guilt trip, a passive-aggressive silence. They throw out bait, and they wait. When you take it, when you react, explain, defend, justify, you've already lost. They've got your attention, and your attention is energy. They feed off your reaction like it's oxygen. That's why after every argument, you feel exhausted while they seem strangely calm or even satisfied. You gave them what they came for, your energy. Think about it. Have you ever tried to explain yourself to someone who clearly had no intention of understanding you? You pour out your truth, your logic, your heart, and by the end of it, you feel empty, confused, and somehow at fault. That's not a coincidence. It's a dynamic. When you start defending yourself against a false accusation, you validate it. When you try to convince someone to see reason, you play their game. They don't want understanding, they want control. And every emotional reaction gives it to them. Carl Jung said, "What you resist, persists." And he wasn't talking about toxic people, he was talking about energy. When you fight something head-on, when you meet force with force, you actually give it more strength. The same applies to emotional manipulation. The more you try to win the argument or expose their hypocrisy, the more you stay trapped in their arena. The only way out is not resistance, it's neutrality. Neutrality is not weakness, it's power. It's what happens when you refuse to feed the chaos. Let's be clear about something. Neutrality is not about pretending nothing happened. It's not staying silent while being mistreated. It's choosing not to react emotionally to the provocation. It's responding from your center, not your wound. When someone says something cruel, instead of firing back or defending yourself, you can simply say, "That's your opinion," and move on. That single sentence shuts down an entire drama cycle. Why? Because it gives them nothing to grip onto. The moment you stop reacting, you become untouchable. Now, some people will hear this and say, "But if I don't respond, won't they think they've won?" That's your ego talking. Toxic people win only when you lose your peace. The real victory is walking away with your energy intact. Picture a chessboard. If your opponent keeps trying to bait you into playing a move that benefits them, sometimes the most powerful strategy is to simply stop playing. The game dies when you refuse to touch the pieces. That's neutrality. But here's what makes it hard: drama feels familiar. Even if it's painful, it gives us something to do, something to feel, something to fix. Many of us grew up in environments where chaos equaled connection. So when things get too calm, part of our nervous system panics. We think silence means danger. We confuse peace with boredom. That's why detaching feels uncomfortable at first. It goes against the emotional wiring you've lived with for years. But that discomfort is temporary. The peace that follows is permanent. You have to train your nervous system to understand that safety doesn't come from control, it comes from calm. When someone tries to provoke you, take a deep breath and ground yourself. Feel your feet on the floor, your heartbeat slowing down. Tell yourself, "I'm not playing this game." Every time you do that, you rewire your brain. You teach it that silence isn't surrender, it's strength. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine a relative who always criticizes your choices. They say things like, "Oh, you think you're better than everyone now?" The old you might have jumped in, defended your decisions, tried to prove your intentions. The new you smiles, says, "You could be right," and changes the subject. That single act of non-reaction saves you hours of emotional recovery. It also sends a message: you can't control me with guilt anymore. At first, they'll push harder, trying new tactics. But over time, when they realize you no longer feed the drama, they stop. The predator moves on when the prey no longer runs. This isn't easy work. Staying neutral when someone's pressing your buttons takes discipline. It's like emotional martial arts. You have to practice not reacting, not personalizing, not engaging. But every time you hold your peace in the face of provocation, you grow stronger. You start to feel that calm confidence that says, I don't need to prove myself. I know who I am. And that's when something magical happens. Chaos loses its grip. Because here's the truth, toxic people can't survive without chaos. They need it like plants need sunlight. When you starve them of drama, they wither. They'll either change their approach or disappear from your life entirely. And both outcomes are wins. You don't need to fix them, teach them, or expose them. You just need to stop feeding the system that keeps them alive. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, when they send that passive-aggressive text, give you that manipulative look, or twist your words, pause. Breathe. Remember, this is a test of energy, not logic. Don't give them the reaction they want. Smile if you can, stay grounded, and walk away. That moment of restraint is not weakness. It's mastery. It's the day you stop being a participant in other people's chaos and start becoming the calm in your own storm. And when you reach that level of peace, you don't just escape toxic people, you outgrow them. Boundaries. Everyone talks about them, but few actually understand what they mean. We're told to set boundaries, learn to say no, or don't let people walk over you, but let's be honest, none of that really works if your boundaries exist only on the outside. Because the truth is, the strongest walls are built from the inside out. You can block someone's number, quit a job, or move across the country, but if your inner boundaries are weak, the same kind of people will show up again wearing different faces. See, toxic people don't just invade your time or space, they invade your mind. They get in through open doors you didn't even know existed. Those doors are your unmet needs, the need to be liked, to be approved of, to be seen as a good person. The need to avoid conflict, to prove your worth, to be understood. Every one of those needs is an entry point. As long as you're trying to fill those voids through others, you're leaving the door wide open for manipulation. Carl Jung said that the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, doesn't disappear just because we deny it. When you refuse to see your neediness, your fear of rejection, your craving for validation, it doesn't go away. It just runs your life from the background. You end up bending, explaining, apologizing, and giving too much, all because you're terrified of losing something you think you need. But that's not love, that's dependency dressed up as virtue. Internal boundaries are about knowing who you are even when no one approves of it. It's the quiet strength that says, I don't need your permission to exist. It's the calm inside you that remains unshaken even when someone disapproves, ignores you, or tries to guilt trip you. When you have internal boundaries, you don't react to every emotional wind that blows your way. You can stay centered in a storm because you've already decided what's worth your energy and what's not. Let's make this real. Picture a moment when someone close to you got angry or disappointed with you. Maybe you told them no and they tried to make you feel selfish. In that moment, did you feel the urge to explain, to make it better, to soften the blow? That's the place where an internal boundary should stand. When you can look at that reaction and instead think, their discomfort is not my responsibility, that's power. You're not being cold, you're being sovereign. You're taking back ownership of your emotional landscape. External boundaries, like blocking, leaving, or saying no, are just the surface. Internal boundaries are the roots. They're what stop you from spiraling into guilt when someone withdraws affection. They're what keep you steady when others try to control you through silence or anger. You stop feeling the need to chase, fix, or explain. You stop believing that peace means keeping everyone happy. Peace becomes an inside job. But let's be honest, developing internal boundaries takes courage. Because it means you have to face the parts of yourself that are terrified of being alone. The child inside you that still believes love is something you have to earn. It means looking that fear in the eye and saying, I can be alone and still be safe. I can be misunderstood and still be whole. The moment you realize that, you become free in a way most people will never experience. Let me tell you something powerful. Internal boundaries are not about building emotional walls, they're about building a foundation. Walls keep everyone out. A foundation holds you up. When you have that inner structure, you don't collapse when someone withdraws approval. You don't chase after closure from people who hurt you. You don't panic when someone disrespects you because you already know how to respect yourself. You see, people with no internal boundaries confuse kindness with weakness. They think being compassionate means being available at all times. They think being understanding means tolerating disrespect. But compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. True compassion starts with yourself. It's being kind to others without betraying your own peace. And here's something few people tell you: when you develop real internal boundaries, your energy changes. You stop walking into rooms trying to prove your worth. You stop over-explaining or apologizing for existing. Your confidence doesn't shout, it hums quietly. It feels like gravity, like something solid and unmovable. Toxic people sense it immediately. They realize they can't manipulate you because you don't have the emotional hooks they rely on. You've removed the handles they used to grab onto. And just like that, they lose interest. Now, this doesn't mean you become untouchable or emotionless. It means you become discerning. You can love deeply, but you no longer confuse love with obligation. You can listen with empathy, but you don't absorb someone else's chaos. You can stand in a storm without letting it define you. That's the power of internal boundaries. They make you emotionally bulletproof, not because you've built armor, but because you've built awareness. So how do you start? Begin by noticing where your peace depends on someone else's reaction. Every time you feel the urge to explain, to prove, or to fix, pause and ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing right now? That question alone can change your life. Because once you name the fear, you can no longer be ruled by it. You will realize that the only thing you ever risk losing by setting boundaries is the illusion of control. As your internal boundaries grow stronger, you stop chasing validation and start embodying self-respect. And people feel that shift. The manipulative ones drift away, the healthy ones draw closer, and your world begins to reorganize around your new energy. It's not magic, it's psychology. You've stopped leaking power. So remember this, the real line between you and the world isn't the one you draw with your words, it's the one you hold with your energy. When you stop needing to be chosen, you become impossible to manipulate. When you stop needing to be understood, you become free. That's the moment you step into your own authority, the quiet, steady kind that doesn't shout, doesn't explain, doesn't chase. It just is. And from that place, no one, not even the most toxic person in the room, can touch your peace. Now we arrive at the deepest and most uncomfortable part of this journey, the place most people never dare to go. You can learn about projections, practice neutrality, even build strong internal boundaries, but if you don't face the darkness within you, the same patterns will keep returning in disguise. Carl Jung said, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." And that sentence contains the final key to freedom. Because everything you refuse to see in yourself, every impulse, every thought, every flaw you've buried under shame, remains alive inside you. And anything that stays hidden can be used against you. Let's be real. We all like to think of ourselves as the good ones. We're kind, empathetic, well-intentioned. But under that layer of goodness, there's a whole world we try to keep buried. Jealousy, pride, rage, the desire for revenge, the craving for control, the fear of being seen as weak. We pretend those parts don't exist, but they do. And when you deny them, they don't disappear, they simply go underground, quietly influencing your choices, your relationships, and your energy. You end up overcompensating, trying to be extra nice, overly giving, excessively patient, hoping no one ever sees that shadow. But paradoxically, that's exactly what makes you vulnerable to toxic people. They sense that secret shame. They smell the fear that you're not as good as you appear. And they push precisely where you're still hiding from yourself. Facing your shadow doesn't mean becoming dark or cynical. It means acknowledging that you're human, that you contain both light and darkness. It's understanding that having anger doesn't make you cruel, that having envy doesn't make you evil, that wanting power doesn't make you manipulative. It just makes you aware. And awareness transforms everything. Because when you stop denying those parts of yourself, they lose their grip on you. The shadow becomes integrated. It turns from a weakness into a source of strength. Let's say you've always tried to be the peacekeeper. You hate conflict. You'll apologize for things you didn't do just to smooth things over. But underneath that peacekeeping is usually suppressed anger. A voice that was never allowed to speak. When you finally meet that anger instead of running from it, something powerful happens. You realize it was never evil. It was trying to protect you. It was saying, stop letting people cross your line. Once you integrate that part, you stop being passive. You can say no with calm authority instead of guilt. You can hold your ground without exploding. That's the magic of owning your shadow. It turns reaction into response, chaos into power. Here's the paradox. The more you accept your darkness, the more peaceful you become. Because no one can blackmail you with your own humanity anymore. You're not scared of being called selfish, because you know you sometimes are. You're not afraid of being seen as cold, because you know how to balance emotion with logic. You're not crushed by criticism, because you've already faced your own judgment. That's what real freedom feels like, when you no longer flinch at your own reflection. When you've integrated your shadow, toxic people can't find an opening. They thrive on guilt and denial. They need you to feel ashamed of something so they can twist it. But if you've already looked at your flaws with honesty, if you've already said to yourself, yes, I have darkness in me, and I choose to use it consciously, then you're untouchable. They can throw their manipulation, their blame, their games, but it won't stick. You're not pretending to be perfect anymore. You're real. And real people are unshakable. I'll give you an example. Imagine someone tries to provoke you by saying, "You're so selfish, you only think about yourself." Before, that accusation would have stung. You would have rushed to defend yourself, listing all the things you've done for others. But now, after integrating your shadow, you simply think, sometimes, I am selfish. And that's okay. You don't react. You don't explain. The attack falls flat. Because there's nothing to grab onto when you're not hiding. That's psychological invisibility. You're not a target anymore. You've transcended the game. But integrating your shadow isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifelong practice. It means constantly being honest with yourself. When you feel resentment, don't deny it. Ask what it's trying to show you. When you feel envy, don't judge it. Ask what part of you wants to grow. When you feel rage, don't suppress it. Learn how to channel it into boundaries, into clarity, into purpose. Because when you give your shadow a voice, it no longer has to scream through chaos. There's also beauty in this process. When you stop hiding from your darkness, you stop judging it in others. You become more compassionate. You see that everyone is fighting battles between their own light and shadow. You stop taking things personally because you recognize projection at work. You understand that most people's cruelty is just unintegrated pain. And with that understanding comes a level of peace that no external validation can match. This, my friend, is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect. Not pure. Whole. When you're whole, you're no longer chasing love, approval, or power. You already have them within you. You stop begging life to give you peace because peace becomes your natural state. You attract people who resonate with that energy, grounded, authentic, balanced. Your relationships evolve. Your decisions become clearer. Your presence itself changes rooms. And here's the irony, when you embrace your darkness, your light shines brighter. Because it's no longer artificial. It's not the forced smile of someone trying to prove goodness, it's the calm confidence of someone who knows exactly who they are. That's what draws healthy, grounded people toward you. You're not pretending anymore. You're radiating truth. So here's how this journey ends, or rather, how it begins. The next time you feel triggered, betrayed, manipulated, or drained, don't just focus on the other person. Turn the mirror inward. Ask yourself, what part of me is still afraid? What part of me is still hiding? Then sit with that part. Listen to it. Forgive it. Because once you bring light to that darkness, you'll realize something profound. The secret to freedom was never about keeping toxic people away. It was about removing the hooks that made you visible to them in the first place. When you integrate your shadow, you stop living as prey and start living as power. You stop surviving and start creating. You walk through the world no longer needing to prove, perform, or please. You're not trying to be light, you are light, because you've made peace with the dark that gives it contrast. And that, right there, is the quiet strength of someone who's truly free. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I know your time is valuable. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even one moment of clarity or peace, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. A simple like, a comment with your thoughts, or subscribing to the channel helps this community grow, and it helps more people who might need these words to find them. Share your reflections below, I do read them. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care of your peace.